Okay, as we come back from lunch today, there are going to be two videos for today. Okay, the first one's already been posted. The second one is where we're going to pick up where we have this given problem, and then we are going to try to identify what it is that allowed us to make the next step. You can see the step has been given here, and it appears from this step to this step that there's been this multiplication. So we realize that this is the distributive property. And this minus sign, we're subtracting 28. And we know parentheses mean multiplication. So this is the multiplication property of -1. And going from here to here, we have changed the order. That is the commutative property of addition. And going from this step to this step, we are able to see that if we look at the distributive property, it is the sum or difference of multiplying. Now what we've done here is we have divided, which is the opposite of. Okay, and this goes both ways across the street, across the way. So this is the, again, distributive property. And here we have just added inside the parentheses. That's not really a property, that is a combining of like terms, which we'll get into more when we get into multiplication. This is not really important for you to know for any kind of quiz that's coming up. Okay? But you will have to take these properties and be able to identify them, as I said, both algebraically and numerically. There's not a lot of different things, different numbers I can put in here for the algebraic part. I can switch some things out numerically, but I'm not here to trick you. I'm here to help you recognize that you use many of these properties, will continue to use many of these properties, and we do have to, as we get more and more into algebra, be able to read these algebraic descriptions of what we are allowed to do, what our properties, what our rules are for moving through the algebra curriculum as we get more and more in depth to manipulation of numbers. Okay? All right, that is all for that. We are going to now move on to the next section. Which is obviously, or maybe not so obviously, and where you want to start, again, with another sheet of paper for your notes for a different section. And we're going to talk about the addition and subtraction of integers and some other rational numbers. And you'll remember that this is our diagram. And for the most part, ladies and gentlemen, we're all pretty good adding and subtracting the natural numbers. It's when we get into the integers, the positive and the negatives, and the fractions that we end up having all of our issues. So we're going to take this slow. We're going to take it one thing at a time. And again, you will have to compute these without the use of a calculator. And you have been through all of the crap regarding integers. The sum of two integers with the same sign. Take the absolute value of each integer, combine them, and keep the sign of the integer. If the signs are different, find the difference of the two numbers and keep the sign of a larger number. That's crap. I need you to remember a couple things. The first is we're going to change all equations to addition. Using add and change the sign. And the add and the change the sign thing is nothing more than putting this in parentheses, realizing that in order to get it out of parentheses, I have to multiply, and if there's not a number in front of parentheses, I know it's a 1. So this is 4 plus negative 7. But we change it very quickly. 4 minus 7, this is a positive charge. So we call it add, changing this sign to add and changing the charge of the second number. Add and change the sign. You have been through this, have you not? Most of you, some of you? Who's been through it? Nobody has heard add and change the sign before? No one? Really? Okay. Well, that's something new for you. That's going to be helpful. The second thing I need you to remember is this is a matter of cash versus bills. And I'm pretty sure you all have heard of cash, right? That's the green stuff that we used to carry around. Now we carry around credit cards. But having cash is a good thing. That's a positive. Having bills, not so much. That's a negative. So what we're going to do is this. We are going to have a problem. And I don't care if it's one that you can solve already or not. I'm going to ask you to do it all the same. You're going to take a minus sign and you're going to change it to plus, and you're going to change the charge of the second number. And then you're going to ask yourself, cash versus bills. What do you have more of here? Cash or bills? Cash. How much more cash you got? 7. And this is the part you're going to have to be able to compute without the use of a calculator. You're going to have to be able to add and subtract. Negative 14 minus a negative 6. You're going to go change this subtraction to add and change the sign of the second number. And again, you're going to ask yourself, cash versus bills. What do you have more of? Bills. How much more? You have $6, you owe me 14. Are we square? No, not even close. You still owe me $8. -4 minus 8. Again, a different configuration. We have one subtraction sign here. We have two numbers that are negative here. We have negative minus a number here. And we're again going to change this sign to a plus. And remember, this charge, even though there's nothing written there, is a positive. So I'm going to change that charge. And then I ask myself, cash versus bills. What do I have more of? Well, more. Hey, the only thing I got is bills. I don't have more of anything. I don't have anything. I owe people $4 and I owe them $8. I got to remember my own lunch money tomorrow. I owe $12. Okay? You got to be able to compute these things. -3 minus -15. I apologize. This is supposed to be a +3. +3 minus -15. Again, I'm going to change this to a plus, and this is going to be plus, and I'm going to change the sign. Add and change the sign. So this is a negative already. It's going to be a positive. This was a 3, and now I'm going to say cash versus bills. What do you have more of? Well, hey, here I've got all cash. So I've got $18. I am living large. Any questions there? All right, we're going to move out of this integer circle into some of these other types of numbers. You know, the fractions, the decimals, the mixed numbers. And we're going to see what we got there. We're going to start very slow, very low key. 18.3 minus -8.1. You're going to change from a negative, add, and change the sign. Oops, there. Let's help you if I can put it in the picture. How about that? You're going to change this to a plus, or add, and change the sign. 18.3 is still here. Now I ask myself, do I have more cash or bills? Well, I got all cash. Got all cash. So I'm going to line up those decimals. 16, carry the 1. So I have 26.4. If I don't put down a negative, it's assumed to be a positive. Absolute value signs. -4 minus 8. This is in an absolute value sign. And again, I want to remind you, the P for parentheses in PEMDAS does talk about parentheses. It includes brackets. absolute value signs, and radicals. Those are all the P in PEMDAS. Those are all the P in PEMDAS. So as I do this, what I want you to recall from the previous examples is we were already down here where we were adding and subtracting. That's what allowed us to add and change the sign. We're now back here at P. And I have to look inside these grouping symbols and find out what I'm going to do. Well, it's thankful that they are, yes, addition and subtraction, but what I got to do, I have to do inside of these absolute value signs. I am going to add, and this sign up here is currently positive, so it's going to change to negative. I'm still working within the parentheses, doing what's inside of them first. -4 plus -8, cash versus bills. Cash versus bills. All I have is bills. And then to take it beyond that, everything inside the parentheses is now done, so now I'll take the absolute value signs away. -12 is 12 units from 0. So the absolute value of -12 is 12. Again, I use cash versus bills to get to this stage, and from here to here, I use the absolute value. Okay? All right. Now, along those same lines, but something a little more difficult, using not just integers, but using decimals, part of those rational numbers that we're working towards. Same kind of concept here. I'm going to do what's inside these absolute value signs first. It is subtraction and addition, so I'm going to change this sign, add, and change this sign to a positive. 3.7, I'm just going to copy it down. It also is positive. So I ask myself, cash versus bills. Oh, that's good. All I got is cash here. And I'm going to take 6.8 and 3.7. I'm going to add them together because they're both cash. And I end up with 10.5. I cannot leave my answer inside those absolute value signs. I have to ask, the definition of absolute value is how far from 0 is the number. So how far is 10.5 from 0? Well, it's 10.5 units. The next example I'm going to give you is kind of an important one, so I'm going to star that for you or highlight that for you. It is the absolute value of -11 minus the absolute value of 29. Now remember, we always have to honor the order of operations. We always have to honor the PEMDAS. And by that I'm asking you, is there anything inside of this, because the absolute value signs are part of the P, is there anything I can do to this? And the answer is yes. I can take the absolute value. How far is -11 from 0? It's 11 units. And the same can be said over here. How far is this from 0? Well, it's 29 units. And what is it that's in between? -29, the minus sign. There are no exponents. There is no multiplication and division. So now I'm down to that addition and subtraction. I dealt with parentheses or grouping symbols. And now I'm dealing with addition and subtraction, and in this case, I'm going to add and change the sign. What do I have more of, cash or bills? Definitely bills. How much more? 18, negative 18. Asking myself the same questions. Cash versus bills. The next example is a little more rugged, a little more to it, and it's because it's a little more difficult, few more signs, few more numbers, we're gonna highlight it. Not that we can't do it, but because we can. Make ourselves look real smart here. In parentheses, we have 6 minus 8 minus 3 times 4. Within the parenthesis here, I am going to add and change the sign. And I'm going to continue to work inside this parenthesis and ask myself, cash versus bills. Well, that's a negative 2. I have more bills than I have cash. There's nothing else I can do here, so I'm going to come over here. Inside these parentheses, I can multiply. And I'll bring it down so that I'm on the same line. Now, I've told you before, these parentheses mean to multiply. So I'm going to use that multiplication property, identity over here, multiplication property of negative 1 over here, and 1 times negative 2 is negative 2, and negative 1 times 12 is negative 12. At this point, I'm going to ask again, cash versus bills. I'm going to change this sign to add. This is a positive charge here. I'm going to change it to negative. I have nothing but bills here. I have a total of 14. Everybody good with that? Any questions there? All right, now, again, moving further out and talking about some decimals, and now we're going to talk about some fractions. I know you're all excited about that. At the end of the year, you're going to realize that fractions are our friends. Negative 1/4 minus negative 3/4. There's nothing inside this parenthesis I can do. So we again are going to add and change the sign. And ask ourselves, cash versus bills. Well, this is a negative 1 and that's a positive 3. Cash versus bills. It's cash. I got 2. You got 2 what? Well, I got 2/4. Okay, but yeah, isn't that? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's reduced to 1/2. It's reduced to 1/2. 3/4 minus 1 1/4. Well, again, fractions, y'all got to be alike. You're a fraction, you're a mixed number. I am not, no, you got to figure this out. So we're going to take and change this. 1 times 4 plus 1 gives us 5/4. These are equal, changing a mixed number to a fraction, improper fraction. And then adding and changing the sign. Cash versus bills. 3 and -5. I got more bills. How many more? 2. 2 what? 2/4. But that was, yeah, that was before and it is again. But this one's negative 1/2 versus positive 1/2 above. Just the two examples I chose. Got to deal with fractions. I'm going to talk a little bit more because we've had trouble substituting here values in. This is C and this is D with a subtraction sign in between them. The value that is C is -3 and the value that is D is -6. And again, a lot of times we see this minus already down here. We say, okay, there's a minus already there, and we just put a 6 here. No. That's not what that means. -3 minus -6. I'm going to add and change the sign like so. And then I'm going to ask cash versus bills. Got more cash than I got bills. Again, this one is a little more difficult. Got a lot of negative signs flying around. So I got to be careful. But you know, my expectations are for you to do one thing at a time, so you know you don't have to get in a big hurry about things. The equation is -C minus a -D. So this is negative, this is a subtraction, a parenthesis, a subtraction, and a parenthesis. When I substitute using parentheses. The C value here is -3, and the D value up here is -6. I'm sorry. So everything I do, I copied down the original problem and then I left the spot where the C and the spot where the D is blank. But I copied down these other negatives and the parentheses. And then substituting, I substitute using parentheses. Now inside this parenthesis, which is where I would start first with PEMDAS, I'm going to add and change the sign, and that is going to be a plain old 6. Does everybody see that? Does everybody see that? We okay with that? On the other side of this minus sign, okay, because that's what separates my terms, the addition and subtraction signs, I have a minus 3. Again, here I am going to add and change the sign, and that makes that a plain old 3. What's in between them? A subtraction sign. And again, I'm not going to shy away from this. I'm going to add and change the sign and ask you if you have more cash or more bills. Well, the answer is more bills. This is a negative 3. Does this make sense to you? Okay? Because the signs can easily mess you up. All right? One more concept, a couple more examples. And that concept is, what if I have multiple terms to add and subtract? Same thing as before. You're going to add and change the sign, and add and change the sign. Then, as we have talked multiple times in PEMDAS, it is from left to right. So 6 minus 10, 6 and a negative 10, cash versus bills is a negative 4, plus another negative 4, bringing that straight down. Cash versus bills again gives me a negative 8. Final answer. Negative 5 plus 7 minus 9. Again, 2 rules. Add and change the sign, and then cash versus bills. This is already addition. Make that addition. Add from left to right, comparing cash versus bills. Cash versus bills again, negative 7. So we have 8 minus a negative 4 minus a negative 5. Add and change the sign. Add and change the sign. 8 plus 4 is 12. Copy down the plus 4. 12 plus 4 is 16. Actually, I tell you what, let's make this a 5 like it is in the original problem. Okay? Make it a 5 like it's supposed to be. That's on me. Sorry about that. Probably will affect our final answer, if I'm guessing. So that's a 5. This is a 5. And this is a 17, not a 16. Okay? Any questions there? All right, so you are going to have an assignment